What have you left to become a disciple of Jesus Christ? What right, what privilege, what that you have you left to become a disciple of Jesus Christ? For you cannot be a disciple of Jesus Christ and still be your own man, your own woman. You have to be willing to leave what you have to come and to gain what Christ will give you. I want to think with you tonight on that subject. Are you a disciple of Jesus Christ? Are you a disciple? That's a real question that we need to look at. You have to look at yourself. Are you a disciple of Jesus? Now, I realize you come to church. I think everybody here, you're regular. I mean, you come on Wednesday nights, you're pretty much a regular. And this is a core group. And it's a group that's dedicated to not only worshiping Jesus, but coming and being a part of the church and seeing the church flourish and be a discipling agency in this community. This is the stronger part of the church group. As I think with you tonight, the question is not whether you like your church or whether you come to your church or whether this is an important location for you to be or whether you love Jesus or not. The question is, are you a disciple of Jesus Christ? And that's a question I think that can be answered by looking at the first 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. Now, the word disciple can mean several different things, but basically what it means is it means someone who likes Jesus so much that they want to follow Him and do what He wants to do. They want to be a disciple of His. It's kind of like a dog. A dog is a disciple when they want to do what you want to do rather than having you go with them while they do what they want to do. And that's a big difference. By and large, if you've raised dogs or had dogs in your life, you know that in the beginning of that relationship, it's all about them. Where they want to go, what they want to do, and it has nothing to do with you. But as that relationship deepens, they want to be by your side with you and do what you want to do. And that's what it is when we meet Christ and Christ comes into our life. We have that desire to take Christ with us and to let Him participate where we want Him to and not to let Him participate in areas that we want to have to our own self. We know what's best for ourselves. But when we become a disciple of Jesus, all of a sudden it's like that dog that you've had for maybe years that's gotten to the point to where it doesn't seem to have a life except with you. It's a life that they want to lay by you, listen to you. They don't want to do anything unless you're willing to go and do it. And then they want to follow you wherever you go. It's almost uncanny. I'll talk more about that in a little while. I have a little story that talks about a British trainer of dogs. He really is more training the people than it is the dog. The dog knows what to do. But it's people come to understand their role in a dog's life. And I'll probably bring that up tonight and use it as an illustration. But tonight, we're talking about ourselves becoming that way with Jesus. It's a lot more than just church attendance, you understand. For the most part, people come to church because they like the people at that church. But sure, they have to like the preacher. No matter what you think of me, you like me in some way, shape, form, or fashion, and you would not keep coming. If you just got to the point you disliked me, I guarantee you'd stop coming. You wouldn't have any problem doing it. You might not know where you're going to go, but you would go somewhere. And through the years, I've had plenty of people that didn't like me, and they decided to go somewhere else. But in a church, you just can't get around the preacher. You know, he's just there. So you either like the preacher or that's one reason you'll leave. But guaranteed, you'll come to the church and develop a relationship with Jesus Christ out of that like for the preacher and the rest of the people that are there. Or you'll go somewhere else to develop that relationship with Jesus Christ. Problem is that Jesus says that we're to leave all and to follow Him where He puts us. So it kind of makes it difficult if we get something between us and the preacher, because just always in our face. You understand what I mean? It's just can't get rid of him. He's there when he's preaching. He's there when we're eating. He's there all the time, you know. He's there for the funerals. He's just there when we're hurting. He's there when we're in the hospital. And that's the way it is with the dog. The dog can't get over the fact that you're his master. And you're always there, no matter how much he likes the house. He's got to like you, or else he's out of here. He might come around to sleep there, but basically he's going to be gone as much as he can because he just doesn't want to be around you. That's what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. When you come to church and you see Jesus in the preacher, when you see Jesus in the members, you begin to fall in love with Jesus and you become a lapdog to Jesus. And these other things seem to take lesser importance to where people can be themselves, even hurt your feelings, and it doesn't mean as much to you as it did in the beginning when it was about them, not about Jesus. So I want to look at some examples tonight. We'll take the 12 disciples. They had to make that decision. Some of them came from a totally different background than from a church background. That just wasn't their cup of tea. Some of these guys were rough and ready. They were out there in the communities. They were doing their thing, and the last thing they thought about was church. And a pastor? Are you kidding me? That's the last thing they wanted to be around. They were looking to improve their income, looking to have a better time, to be with their buds, with their friends. And that just didn't seem to be something they wanted. But then Jesus saw them, and He called them, and they decided to change and drop everything else and to put their focus on Jesus. And then all these other things come along. It's interesting as we look at the disciples, as you begin to learn more and more about the disciples, you'll say, how in the world did that 12 men, how did they ever get along with each other? They had nothing in common for the most part. Now, they did divide up into different groups, and we call them cliques today. And you do that too. I try to get you to move around, sit in different places, but as soon as I take my eyes off of you, you're back to the same old seat. And I try to get you to sit with different people at the dining table, but it doesn't matter. As soon as I'm not watching, you sit down with your trusted friends that you always sit with. And Jesus got these guys together, and they wound up being, there was 12 of them, and there wound up being 4 in each group. They stayed with that 4 in that group, and there were 3 groups of 4. We'll look more at that tonight, but we'll see that, how it works tonight as we examine that. Call to discipleship is the first thing I'd tell you that we need to look at if we're going to realize that we're a disciple of Jesus Christ. The first thing we got to realize is that we're called to discipleship. We're called to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Get your focus on the preacher, you get your feelings hurt. Get your focus on somebody in the congregation, get your feelings hurt. You can wind up spending your entire life jumping from church to church to church and never be happy because you got your focus on the wrong thing. The disciples were all different, and they got on each other's nerves, I'm sure, but they stayed together because of their interest in Jesus. That's where they had their focus, and we have to do the same thing ourselves. Think with me tonight in this passage found in Matthew, the 10th chapter. Now, I saved this chapter, this first part of the chapter, and Sunday I preached from verse 16 forward in chapter 10. It was a bigger sermon. Tonight, I want to focus on the disciples, and that's the first part of chapter 10. So I kind of got them backwards because they fit better for the time when we actually meet. And you're more of disciples than Jesus Christ than the typical Sunday goer only is, because you have got your focus more on Jesus than you have on someone in this congregation, because you're coming at least twice a week. Some of you come in multiple times more than that. So think with me tonight as we look at Matthew the 10th chapter, and we'll begin with the first part, and that is that Jesus calls every one of us. He calls us. That's that word that needs to be filled in there. The word call to discipleship. Let's pray. Father, thank you for calling us. Thank you for taking and caring about us. And then thank you that not only you call us, but then you commission us to do something with that discipleship. So as we look at these two different things tonight, help us to understand these two C's, these important C's in our life as we consider what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. In His name, amen. Well, the first thing I see here is, let's look at the first 5 verses. You ready? In the first 5 verses, we read, summoning His 12 disciples, He gave them authority over unclean spirits. Stop and think of the power that He gave these men. This is the power that He had, and He was willing to give it to these roughnecks who couldn't even get along with themselves because of one thing. They were willing to leave everything behind and become a disciple. And so He trusted them with His power. God will give you greater power, greater abilities, greater discernment when He can trust you to do that. It's kind of like a little dog came into my life as a wedding present. And that little dog and I, 5-pounder, when she first came into the house, she went everywhere. She went on the floor in the living room. She went on the couch. She went on the floor in the bedroom. She went everywhere. And then when she'd get out in the yard, she'd go everywhere too. She'd go to the neighbor's house. She'd go here. She'd go there. Now, it's not that she didn't like the food that I served, because she'd eat it. And it's not the fact that she didn't like the fact that we were taking care of her. She liked that part. But she didn't have much really to do with us. She just tolerated us to get the benefits. These disciples came with Jesus, and to become a disciple, they had to leave everything. Everything. I like to equate it to discipleship to getting married. The reason most marriages don't succeed is because we're not willing to leave everything for the other person. We're not willing to leave everything and give ourselves fully to the other person and trust that they won't kill us. Or anything less than that. Think about it. Call to discipleship. Verse 1 again. He says, summoning the 12 disciples, He then gave them the authority to do what? Authority over unclean spirits. Only God can do that. To drive them out and to heal every disease and every sickness. Can you imagine having that power? And these are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who's called Peter. It was Simon. But then Jesus took a look at him and He saw that Simon meant a little pebble. And He said, Simon, you're going to be bigger than that. You're going to be a big rock. So He called him Peter, the big rock. And Andrew, his brother. And James, the son of Zebedee. And John, his brother. And he goes on and he says, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector. What? I don't even want to say what the tax collector would equate to us inviting in our congregation and then giving them the power, God giving them the power that He gives you and trusts you with. I mean, the most horrible criminal in the world comes in my church and God says, okay, I'll pick him. I'm going to give him the authority that I have. That's what it meant when He gave it to Thomas, Matthew the tax collector, and then James the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. Some of these guys were okay guys, but none of them were people that you would trust your children to stay with. Simon the Zealot, Judas Iscariot, we know where he went, but he was right there among us. He gave him that power. And then Jesus sent the 12 out, and He gave them some instructions. Jesus sent them out with all this power and all this authority. It's kind of like my dog. Just 5-pounders. I mean, a big bird can lift her up and take her off. And I'm serious. First thing I was told is, watch out, the birds will get her. And I thought, the birds will get her? Yeah, they can just pick her up and take her off. She's only 5 pounds. It's just a ball of fur. I told you the other day when I spank her with my handkerchief. It sounds ridiculous to me too, but the dog thinks I'm beating her with a board. And you know what? As soon as I open the door, that dog goes where she wanted to go, does what she wanted to do. When we leave, like right now, she got the whole house to herself. And when we used to do that, we used to come in. I tried caging that dog. I tried buying different cages for that dog. I tried tying up that dog. She chewed through wooden doors. She pooped on everything there is to know and peed in other places just at her own will. Whatever she thought we didn't want her to do, she did it. She was going to show us who owned the home. It was hers. And she didn't like us not staying there and taking care of her. And you open the door, and the first thing she'd do is she'd make a run for the neighbor's house. She had no idea what was over there. Big dogs that would have killed her. But it didn't make any difference. She was going to go. It had to be better than where she was. And Jesus sent them out. Didn't say He went with them. He sent them out with all of His power. The power that impressed other people, that got Him to where He is. He gave it to them and sent them out. You know that's how much Jesus trusts you? Say, well, I don't feel like I have any of that power. Well, I don't know what that says about you and Jesus. But the bottom line is that's what He wants to do with a disciple. A disciple is a learner. A disciple is a follower. A disciple is one who goes out and brings other people to Him. And we see this as we look at the 12 disciples and follow their lives. They kept bringing people into the church. It cost them something. Every one of them had a career and a successful job and family and all that. They had to leave mother and father. They had to leave them to take care of themselves. They had to leave grandchildren. They had to leave friends. They had to give up work. They had to lose their careers. They had to do all of this to trail around with Jesus and not have a place to lay their head. And not only that, but to be chased out of every city they went into because Jesus was not liked by the leaders of the cities. But He gave them His power. He could trust them because they gave everything to Him. And He trusted them. Now we know that all of them weren't worth the trust, but He gave it to them anyway. He wanted them to know what it meant to be fully trusted, to see where it goes from there. Now, as you look down through there were 12 of them, of course. Where does the 12 come from? Sometimes people tell me the number 144,000. That's all that's going to go to heaven, right? And I say, yeah, that's all that's going to go to heaven. Do you know what 144,000 means? There are cults that teach you different meanings of that. But if you go to the Bible to find out what 144,000 is, and that's all that's going to go to heaven. And by the way, you know, a lot more than that. Christians have already died, and they've gone to heaven. What does that mean for the rest of us? We're all going to go to hell? Well, if you have that kind of belief, yes, it does. But 144,000 comes from a very simple thing, and that is that Jesus first sent them out, we'll see, to the 12 tribes of Israel, to the Jews. And He told the disciples, now you can go out, but don't go. Look down at verse 5 again. Notice that what He tells them in the second part of that, don't take the road that leads to the Gentiles. And do not enter any Samaritan city. He told them they couldn't go anywhere but to the 12 tribes of Israel. There's 12. Now later, it's not really fair. I don't know if you understand this or not, Robert, but Jesus went to Jews and He went to Gentiles. But He told the disciples they could only go to Gentiles. I mean, really, if He's going to give them the power, you might as well let them do what they want to do. I imagine that's the only place they wanted to go. But the 12 tribes of Israel, and then you take the 12 apostles, because later these disciples, these 12 that are dedicated to Him, 11 of them, plus Paul would come and make the 12. That would make 12 that are reaching out to the Gentiles later. All the Jews and all the Gentiles are all offered salvation under the same headship of Jesus Christ. So you have 12 and 12. If you multiply 12 times 12, what do you get? Some of you great mathematicians, tell me what you get. 144. Uh-oh, there's part of the number. I said that magic number, 144,000. And then if you take the number that shows total completeness for man is the number, what? 10. And if you really want to go way out there, what would be more fun than having $10? How about 100? And what would be more fun than having $100 than to have 1,000? 1,000 meant the biggest number that anybody can imagine. If for your child's birthday you give them $10, they'll look at you and say, whoa, that is great. You've given them the ultimate gift. But it won't be many years before they'll say, $10? Then you give them 100 and they say, whoa, that's a nice gift. But don't worry, it won't be long before they would like you to give them $1,000 for the present, right? 1,000 is the biggest number they could imagine. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles reaching out to the Gentiles later, times 1,000 is 12 times 12 is 144 times 1,000 means everybody of all races, of all creeds, of all beliefs, all colors, everybody is invited to follow Jesus. That means everybody's invited to heaven. Whether a Jew, whether a Gentile, whether a male, whether a female, everybody is invited to go to heaven. It's a free gift to all. 144,000 means everybody. But it started, the disciples were to go to only the Jews. That's where Jesus started. That's where He told them to start. So we see that in Peter. He divides these men up into three groups. And the three groups, number one, you'll always find Peter, whether you're in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. No matter where you find the disciples listed, you'll always find that Peter is always the listed one. Now, the Roman Catholic Church tells you that Peter was the head of the church then, but that's not true. It was James, the brother of Jesus, not the James listed here, one of the disciples, but the brother of Jesus who did not believe Jesus was God until after Jesus died and raised from the dead on Easter. Then he believed, and he would become the head of the church in the days of the disciples and the days of the apostles. They would actually lay that to him, and James, the brother of Jesus Christ, would become the head of the church. Peter wasn't the head. Peter was the head of the disciple band. But he wasn't the head of the church. He was the head of the disciples. But the head of the whole Christian church of that day was James. So we see here Peter, Philip, and James. This is a different James. This is James, the son of Alphaeus. And these are always grouped together. No matter what listing, how you find them listed in the Bible, sometimes this order, sometimes they'll change the name a little bit and they'll use a nickname and this and that. But they're always listed in threes, all four groups. And Peter, Philip, and James are always listed as the heads. They're the heads. Three groups. Now, they were sent out 2 by 2. God never intended for you to be alone in your following of Him. He always intended you to be with somebody, to be paired up with somebody. When we train in evangelism here at the church through the years, we always train people to go out in groups of 2 or 3. Sometimes it's better because you usually have more women that want to be trained and are willing to take and serve Jesus. If you look around the church, you'll always find more women. And so it's necessary not only to have 2 by 2 because there are more women, you would be able to pair 2 women with 1 man. And therefore you would have the safety of the man in the disciple group as they go out to do that. But in that day it was only 2 men, so they didn't need a third person. They didn't need a woman to go with them for safety. It was just men in that particular day. So it was 2 by 2. But we still do the 2 by 2, but we do it with a man with 2 women, or 3 women, or 3 men, or 2 men and a woman. But we try never to even do that. We always try to have 2 women with a man when we send people out. So there's never any misunderstanding by people as to what that group is doing when they're on the streets. And then let's take a look at them. In number 3, there were 3 groups, of 4 each. Each group was headed by either Philip, Peter, or James. And they were sent out in twos. 2 of them would go out. And then when they went out, Peter, his group was called the inner core. When you see Jesus taken aside and it was called his inner core, it's always Peter's group. And Peter's group was that group that first got called. That was Peter, and then there was Andrew. And you remember, they were known as the sons of thunder. They were fishermen, and they were originally disciples of John the Baptist. Jesus went, and when he was recognized and pointed out by John the Baptist as being the Christ, the Messiah, had come to earth and was baptized, Jesus took, and some of the disciples left John the Baptist and went off to Jesus to follow him, and they left following John the Baptist to be able to follow Jesus Christ. It cost them something to do that. Then Peter was known as the man that was impulsive. He was known as the guy that was zealous. So he was warm. He was committed to bringing other people to Jesus. And then there was James and John. James was probably the older of the two, but he had never achieved his brother's prominence of John. And so then we see the brothers that were the sons of Zebedee, the fishermen. Now, Zebedee was a rich man. He had a fishing business, and he was a wealthy man. And in Zebedee's family, when he took and made, we would call him a millionaire today, he had contact with the high priest in the courts and things like that. And at the death of Jesus Christ on the cross, guess who of all these different people was there at the bottom of the cross that day the whole time and got away with it? Zebedee. Because nobody questioned the millionaire being there. He could be wherever he wanted to, and people weren't going to do anything about it. His business was successful enough that he was one of the primary donors to the disciples of Jesus Christ and to the disciple band. He took and put money into that disciple band so that as Jesus and the disciples went around, they had money to get from one place to the next. He was a big donor into missions as Jesus went out on the mission and sent the disciples out there. And then Philip was another one of the leaders, and we see that he left John the Baptist also. And then there was Bartholomew, and Philip brought Nathanael to Jesus, and then Philip, after doing that, and Bartholomew, they're always associated after that. It's amazing when somebody brings you to Jesus, you never forget it. I never forget Mrs. Fletcher Hamilton. She was the lady that made cookies, invited me over to her house, and eventually took me to church. Got my mother to give permission. I'll never forget her. And I only knew her when I was a kid, but I'll never forget her because she's the one that took me to church where I met Jesus Christ. And I went back to the church many years later and wanted to thank her. She had no clue who I was. None. She didn't remember me. I mean, she'd done that with lots of kids in the neighborhood. But I will never forget her. And then when Philip came, he brought Nathanael to Jesus, and Philip and Bartholomew, they're all associated, as I said. And then they came from Cana, where Jesus did his first miracle at the wedding. They saw that and thought, this is somebody we need to follow. This is certainly God. He couldn't do this if it wasn't. So they followed him. And then there was Didymus. Didymus means twin. He was a twin. He was known for several different things. He was known for being a doubter. He was known for courageous. He was known for his profession of faith. His profession of faith, and found over in John verse 28, says, my Lord and my God. He really looked up to Jesus. He believed in him. And we go on down through the list. Matthew, remember, he was a hated tax collector. Nobody would have invited him to church, but Jesus called him to be one of the 12 disciples, to be that, and named him. He was named Levi, and he named him Matthew to give him a decent name. And then Thaddeus, as we talked about, and Simon the Zealot was different than Simon Peter. And then, of course, Judas Iscariot, he was the betrayer. And the disciple is always a learner. That's one of your fill-ins. The original disciples some of the original disciples were disciples of John the Baptist, one of your fill-ins. And the other fill-in is that A disciple is a learner. It's somebody that is learning, growing in their learning ability. In a book called No Bad Dogs, the author there is a British dog trainer. Her name is Barbara Woodhouse. And she talks about dogs, and she talks about the fact that everybody thinks their dog loves them. And the reason they do is when you go home, like when I go home tonight and I open that door, that dog will be jumping up and down, and 5-pounder can jump almost to my face. She just springs like this right now. If I took and looked at my house right now and had some way of monitoring the front door, she's there in front of that door just jumping up and down. She does it the entire time until I get back home, just jumping up and down in front of that door. Just breathing heavy, and she'll stop. You can just see her breathing like that, and then she's up and down. She does that the entire time. We're all just thinking I'm on the other side of that door that Viola or I are going to come walking in just a few moments. And she said that people think their dogs love them when many dogs do not love their owners at all. They tolerate them and put up with them because of the benefits they get from living with them. And in a dog's mind, a master or mistress is to love them and to honor them and to obey them. That is absolutely built into the dog's DNA. A dog has that built into them to do those three things: to love, to honor, and to respect and obey in every way. It's dormant in the dog until you bring it out. Now, how do you bring it out? That's a good question. It's the same way that Jesus brings it out in us when He invites us to become a Christian and we become a Christian. It's built in us to love God and to want to follow Him and to be close to Him and to trust Him. And whatever He says to do, it doesn't have to make worldly sense. It's built in us to love God and trust Him and to do what God says, no matter how stupid or how much it costs us. Or like these 12 disciples, they all gave up major things of their life, left behind family and friends, and gave up the fortunes and the whole 9 yards to become a disciple of Jesus, and many of them to die a cruel and mean death, hated by almost every place they went, hated by the people of the city that they were witnessing to. She says the dogs, the people will tell you that the dog loves them and can't wait for them to be home. And when I'm in, she's jumping up on me, just laughing and smiling and so happy I can pick her up and hug her. She loves it and then wants to go outside with me. And as soon as you go outside, in the early days when I would open the door and go outside, poing, she's gone. And I have to carry a spotlight with me to keep up with where she's going, because I know exactly where she's going to go. She's going to dart down that dirt road that leaves all my property and be gone. And I wouldn't find her for a long period of time, and then usually because the neighbor would call and tell me that she's over there trying to get in. And that they got big dogs and they'd eat her in one bite. But she doesn't understand that. She just thinks it's better out there somewhere, just like church members do a lot of times. And the true test of a dog is to find out whether they really love you, is to do this. You ready for this? When you can take and open the door to your house and stay inside and open the door, and the dog stays by you instead of going outside when you know they need to go to the potty, when you know they've been locked up for a long time, and if they stay by you until you walk outside, you got to clue them that that dog loves you. That's not the final test. When you go outside and you walk around and they just walk with you and sit down beside you and you stand there, like sometimes I'll walk out and I'll carry my cell phone and I'll be reading different stuff on there, and I'll look down and there's a dog sitting right beside me, and I'll say, go potty. That's what we're out here for. I'm not out here to read. I'm just putting up reading, waiting on you to do your business. The dog looks at me like I said, I'm not leaving. I'm staying right here by you. That's the way it is today, but that is not the way it was for many months. That's when you know the dog loves you. When they so much want to be with you that they'll hold it inside until they burst, where they can't hold it any longer. You want to pick them up and squeeze them and make it come out so that you can go inside, especially during the winter and when it's really cold, you know. Hurry up, go potty, I got to go inside, I'm freezing to death. Dog looks at you like, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to leave your side. That's when you find out a dog really loves you. When you can open the door, close the door, leave the dog outside for an hour or two, and the dog will still be sitting on the porch when you go outside. You wonder, why didn't he run away? My dear friend, that's how you know, how Jesus knows when you're a true disciple of His. When the week comes along and there's no church, nobody's watching, and you're still so in love with Jesus, you're still at His feet. Still thinking about the sermon. You're still thinking about somebody that needs to know Jesus, and you're still out there going to the Gentiles, going to the Jews, or going to the people out yonder and trying to drag them in through whatever means you can. Through the years of having dogs, I've had them bring me rats. Dog I had before, Deacon, used to bring me leftover parts from rabbit because he liked to eat first, but he'd bring me always a good part. I didn't like that, but he wanted to treat me. He didn't want to eat the whole thing by himself, not save me some. Never could convince that dog I didn't want any. But that's a real test. And Jesus wants that with you. Are you called to discipleship? It'll show. He won't leave Jesus aside even to take care of things that you need to do. You'll love Jesus so much. Then I close with this. The second half of this is the commission that He gave the disciples when He sent them out. This is what He told them. Look at verse 5 again. He said, I want you to go out and don't take the road that leads to the Gentiles, and don't enter any Samaritan town. And Jesus says to you, I don't want you to go there. I want you to go over here. And you say, holy smokes, I can't go over there. They're my only friends. If I go over there talking Jesus to them, I know they'll disown me, and I won't have anybody that loves me anymore. And Jesus says, that's where I want you to go. I want you to go invite them into church with you. Bill and I were talking, and we're remembering back to when we found each other. And we talked to people that go, she went over 20 years not getting married, and then she met me, and after she met me, it was settled that we were going to get married, so to speak. I had her heart, and she couldn't get away. No, the truth of the matter is that she came to that place in her life where she decided she was ready to get married. And she knew it had to be a church. She went to 2 meetings at a church that she didn't used to go to. She left the church she regularly went to, a Christian church, and she went to another church simply to meet the right man there. You won't meet them sitting in a church service, by the way. People come to the services for worship. You have to go to where singles gather, your age, gather for the purpose of meeting somebody. Now, you can go to a bar and you'll get a drunk. You can go to a church singles group and marry a godly person. That's the trick. I went one time. And when I went there were 200 women there, and every one of those were there for a reason, and that was they were there to look for a man. And she was there. She just happened to be the prettiest one there, so I went to her first. And after I saw her, I just couldn't see anybody else. And that led down the road. But I want you to understand that when you get that kind of single focus, when you realize you're a disciple of Jesus, you're going to have to forsake some things. She had to give up going to the church. She had a Christian church she'd been going to for years to go to a church big enough to have a singles group that had socials. And to be able to go to the socials, you had to attend the services. You had to have some way to get into that singles social group, and it was through the front door of the church, not through the back door into the singles ice cream socials. Commission, a disciple. You see, God gives us discipleship for a reason, and that is that He commissions us to go get more people and bring them in. Look at verse 6. Go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Don't go to the people that are attending church. Go to the people that are not attending church. And as you go, proclaim the kingdom of heaven is near. In other words, when we go to the people's houses, we're to go to lost people, people that don't go to church. And what are we to say to them? We're going to say, you're going to go to hell. You'll probably tailor it down a little bit, but make it a little bit more gentle than that. But the bottom line is, you've got to have a purpose. If you're a disciple of Jesus, you're commissioned to go out and to win people. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those with leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you receive, freely you give. Don't acquire gold, don't acquire silver, don't acquire copper for your money belts. You have a focus in mind. Win people to Jesus. Don't take a traveling bag for the road, or an extra shirt, or sandal, or staff. For the worker will be taken care of by the people that he's ministering to. Don't take a traveling bag. When you enter into any town or village, find out who's worthy there. Who's worthy of the ones that invite to take care of you. Stay there until you leave. Greet a household when you enter it. And if the household is worthy, let your peace be on it. But if it is unworthy, let your peace return back to you. And if anyone does not welcome you or listen to your words, then shake the dust off your feet when you leave that house or that town. Truly I say to you, it will be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. When we stand before God in heaven and God says, why should I let you into heaven? And we say, I'm banking on Jesus to get me in here. He said, okay, you're in. Now, what'd you do with your discipleship? And you said, well, put it in my pocket, and I was proud that I had it and waited for the day when you'd call me home. God says, you're in. You're over there. You're working in the fields. The other person comes along, God says, what did you do with your discipleship? And he says, well, I led Mary, and I led Bill, and I led Sam, and I led Anita, and I led Rebecca. And you just start going down the lane and naming the different people. God says, come in, receive your reward. Mansions over there on the hilltop. You've got scores of years to live. How are you going to live them? And it'll be a pleasure to be a servant in heaven. It's way better than hell. Wouldn't it be a joy to enter heaven with an armful of people that you've led to know Jesus? And to present that to Jesus Christ. The disciples were happy in the exercise of their ability to perform. They might have been tempted to evangelize. That's a fill-in. To evangelize certain people. But they were told to go instead to a certain group, and God will lead you to people that you don't expect to be asked by God to go and witness to. That's exactly who He wants you to do it. You'll be effective there because God will prepare their heart before you go. They remember Jesus was very successful with the Samaritans. Why? Because nobody cared about the Samaritans. And they wanted to go there. It would be an easy pick. They didn't want to go to their wealthy friends and to their friends that were successful and all of that. They wanted to go to the people that would be desperate. Jesus expected the disciples to be supported as another fill-in. He expected them to be supported, financed by the very people that they will win into Jesus. Think back to the people that have been discipled through the Bible. Just think back to who they are. Think with me as you go through the Bible just a second. Noah, he was that drunk that I talked about a while ago. Abraham, come on, let's get real. He was too old to do any good. And then Isaac, he was just a daydreamer. Jacob, well, we all know he was a liar. And Joseph, he was abused. Moses had a stuttering problem, and God said, you're to go talk to the Pharaoh. Moses said, what? You ain't going to listen to me? God says, you're the man. What's your excuse? Samson had long hair. And he was a womanizer. I mean, look at the people that God chooses. Rahab, well, she was a whore. She was a prostitute. Jesus, do you know who you're picking? Well, he picked you. Elijah was suicidal. Isaiah preached naked. How would you like to have that happen? And then Jonah, he ran from God when God called him. Naomi, she was a widow, had no chance of a man in her life. Job, he went bankrupt. John the Baptist, he ate bugs. I mean, you see him preaching? Picking them out? He ate bugs. That was his meal. Yeah, right. Peter, he denied Christ. The disciples ran from God. Naomi was a widow. Job went bankrupt. Think of the 12 disciples. They all fell asleep while Jesus was praying on his last night before he'd be crucified. They couldn't even stay awake on his last night before he'd be crucified. And Martha? Well, Martha worried about everything in her life. And the Samaritan woman? Worst. Can't use her. Oh yeah? God can use anybody. God uses everybody that are willing to be a disciple. She not only was divorced, but she was divorced again, again, and again. I think she'd learn. Men are all the same. If you want one, you're going to have to put up with them because they're all the same. They don't get any better. And Zacchaeus, well, let's get real. The guy was just too small to be effective. But Jesus called him. Paul, he was too religious. He was a zealot. He went around killing people because they believed in Jesus, and God called him to be a disciple to win people to Jesus. Timothy had an ulcer. He worried about everything. And Lazarus, come on, how can Lazarus be? He was dead. Jesus had to raise him from the dead for him to be used. Let me ask you a question. What's your excuse for not serving God? What is your excuse for not bringing people to church? What is your excuse for not witnessing about what it means to be a Christian and to have the peace that passes all understanding? Jesus says, be a Matthew and go get somebody and bring them to Jesus. And besides that, remember, it's not about you. They're not going to look at you. They're going to look at the Jesus that you introduced them to. When Bella came into my life as a little dog, I was barely over Barry and Deacon. It was a lot in my life. And then she come walking through the door. A wedding present. You can't hardly turn down a wedding gift. You know what I mean? So they say the first year of marriage, you got to work out all the kinks and get used to each other. And we're doing that. We're doing a pretty good job. I've almost got her trained to like me the way I am. That's a joke. And then Bella comes in the midst, and I got to learn to like another dog. Not only that, but one that Deacon would have coughed up as a bug. I got him buried in the backyard. I know every time I go walking out there and stand with her, and she's sitting there right by my feet, he's looking at me saying, with a laughter, gotcha. What are you doing? You received him. Are you a disciple? Would you stand together with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for loving us, calling us to be disciples of yours. But Lord, whether we are a disciple depends upon what we do, what we've been given. You want to do the work. You have to be willing to go. Thank you, Father. Bless us and speak through us tonight in Jesus' name. We're going to sing a song of invitation. It's an opportunity for you to get up, make a decision for Jesus. You're willing to get up and make a decision for Jesus. Nobody is going to follow you to Jesus. You got to be willing to leave all and to come to Jesus. Are you willing to do that?